Welcome everyone. I am Blake from Bourbonr. This is the Bourbonr live review. Tonight we have a pretty special one. Always gets a lot of attention every fall. That is the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. So if you're not familiar with the Antique Collection, if you're watching this, I can almost guarantee you, but I'll just do a quick review. So it's released once a year by Buffalo Trace. They have 5 bottles in the Antique Collection. It's George T. Stagg, W.L. Weller, Thomas Handy, Sazerac 18 year, and Eagle Rare 17 year. So with that collection, it's kind of like a vintage. You know, each year it's a little different. For 3 of them that are at barrel proof, it's at a different proof each year. For the Eagle Rare and the Sazerac 18 year, they're always at 17 years for the Eagle Rare and 18 years for the Sazerac, but both are at 90. Well, excuse me, Sazerac's at 90 proof. I almost forgot. Eagle Rare moved the proof to 101 last year. So those two remain the same, but everything else will be barrel proof and change from year to year. In general, yeah, I won't get too far into the years because I'm going to do the George T. Stagg and the William LaRue Weller reviews tomorrow. But in general, the age on each of them remains about the same. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go by proof, lowest to highest. So I'm going to start with the Sazerac 18 year. So like I said, this one's at 90 proof. And I went ahead and I pulled a bottle of each from a prior release to kind of compare it to. So this is for Sazerac. I have a 2015 version. And that is important because if you're familiar with the brand in the Antique Collection, with this particular bottle, it used to be from tanked whiskey. So from, I believe it was 2005, and then it stopped in 2015. They were pulling from the exact same tanks. So basically they dumped barrels into steel tanks, and then they would just slowly pull from it for the release each year. Now, and this was not, well, it was kind of whiskey that Buffalo Trace made. So it was actually, they contract distilled it for Cream of Kentucky. Those barrels went to Cream of Kentucky. The Ancient Age Distillery, which was then became Buffalo Trace Distillery, eventually bought those back. And so they made it, it went off, it came back. Then at 18 years, they're like, man, this stuff's really good. We don't want to risk it going any longer. So they threw it all in steel tanks and would just slowly pull from that for the release each year. Then in 2016, they started releasing fresh barrels again. So their barrels actually made it to the 18-year mark, and so now the barrels for this release are dumped from fresh barrels each year. And I'm going to pour a little bit more of the current release because I'm not sure if that's lighting. See if I can get a. It's a little hard to tell on screen, but man, just from the initial look, the 2015 is much darker than the current release. So I've had some issues and some things that I didn't love with this release in the past couple of years of it coming out of fresh barrels, but we'll jump in and see how it is. The nose is actually really nice. So I feel like, you know, in the past couple of years, it was much harder on the nose. This is much more floral, much more fruity. It's got like a sweet bacon spice note. So think like pepper and cinnamon. It almost has like a caramelized apple note, which you don't, you know, I don't typically get that from this. So it's got a lot of dried cherries, apricots, a little bit of brown sugar. It has like a, man, I don't even know how to describe it, like a minerally note. almost like a, I don't want to say stale because that sounds bad, but it is like a little bit of a dusty note, almost like mothbally. It's a little surprising. I probably made a little bit of a face that I shouldn't have made, that gave it away, but you know, I like it actually. It's got a dustiness to it. And I don't mean dusty like, the typical dusty whiskey flavor profile with the butterscotch and all that, or funky. It's like, if you walk into an old house and pull something out of the closet, it almost has a little bit of that aroma to it. It kind of has like, I don't know, this one's kind of funky. It's got like a sweet tart note. I don't know. So the nose is actually really nice. The flavor is good. It's got good sweetness to it. There's a little bit of spice, I get some of that, but then like the finish is just like this kind of weird medicinal. I'm trying to put my finger on it. It just has a different. I don't know. I'm gonna think about that one while I taste the 2015 version. Yeah, so Miguel put cork bottle. So I don't think you can cork a plastic sample bottle, but that is almost the taste that it is. Like if you have a bottle where the cork is almost disintegrated, you just knew too much air and it kind of turned a little bit. It's different. This just out of the gates, nose is sweeter. It's more caramel. There's a bubblegum note to it. Yeah, it's rounded all the way through. And by rounded I mean there's sweetness. It's layered with like some more of like the dried like baking spice, a little bit of oak, but just a lot of good sweet fruit, dark cherries, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean that's it's hard to beat the tanked Sazerac. There's just a little bit of the brown sugar that I kind of get on this, but it doesn't go into that funkiness. It stays more in like the apricots and peaches and bubble gum, a little bit of melon, a little bit of green tea on the finish. Just a lot going on, but well balanced. Whereas I feel like on the yeah, Carrie said try 2015 and go back. Um, so I'm gonna go back to it a little bit because it's just a little, I don't know. So I didn't get as much the second time around, and call that, just taste buds getting a little more numb from the alcohol or whatever, but not quite as much. But it definitely still has that. It's an old dusty mothbally taste. It's like so more of like a dry cedar note. I think that's a pretty good descriptive word to explain what I'm tasting. So okay, so with the first one, I would say, and I don't have my notes from the 2018 Sazerac 18 year, but I would say it's better than that, but it's definitely not what the tank used to be. It's just still, and I'm interested to see other people's notes now, because that's a little different one for me. You don't get a ton of that typically. Granted, I know it's 18 years old, so that makes a big difference when you have that old of whiskey. But yeah, I'm pretty interested to see what other people think about that. And that's kind of the fun thing about I tried to review these first so I wouldn't be influenced by others' reviews, because I just wanted to get my thoughts out there, whether they're right, whether they're wrong. Who knows? Sazerac 18 year will probably win whiskey of the year somewhere, and I'll look dumb, but won't be the first time. And really, the idea with these is, somebody even said it on Twitter of, oh, great, we get to watch the reviews of bottles we'll never see. And it's true. Like, that is the state of the industry at these days. But a lot of times when people are doing raffles and that kind of thing, if you win a raffle and you get the option of, hey, what do you want? I want people to be able to know what's out there. Or if you're at a bar, it's like, hey, is it worth spending $60 for a pour of Sazerac 18? I'd say no, but that is my opinion. All right, I'm going to move on. Like I said, we're going up by proof. So started with the 90 proofer of Sazerac 18 year. Going to move up to the Eagle Rare 17. And so initially this was a 90 proof bourbon, and it is now, as of 2018, moved to 101 proof. So this is the bottle I have is a 2014, which is interesting because it was actually a 19-year-old bourbon that they had been sitting on. Yeah, they had so much sitting around, they just let it sit for an extra 2 years, and it was 19 years old. So if I was thinking, I would have brought home the sample from last year from my office, which was actually the 101, but still a good comparison to compare the two. I'm going to reverse orders this time. I'm going to start with the 2014 version of Eagle Rare 17. And I'm not going to give many descriptors on this. I've reviewed them here before. Really, it's just try to give a benchmark and something, notes I'm looking for, comparisons to previous years. Yeah. With Sazerac, or excuse me, with Eagle Rare 17, you get a little bit of sweetness up front, but then it moves into like just some dry notes, some tobacco, some leather, orange peel, just a lot going on. And the thing I love about that is there is still a good sweetness level. And if you've watched my reviews before, I like that in general with bourbons. So it doesn't get extremely dry. It doesn't get extremely spicy, but it just kind of starts sweet and moves progressively slower to the back palate and is a little drier with the leather and all of, cigar tobacco, all that kind of stuff. All right. I'm going to take one more sip. Yeah. It's good. Good as I remember. Actually think I found these here locally in Jacksonville. I don't know if it's still on, but I found them at a Browdy's store in Jacksonville. I was leaving the TPC and forced my wife to stop at Browdy's really quick on the way home, and she wasn't too happy about it. And I walk in, and there are 2 bottles of Eagle Rare 17 sitting there on the shelf. Granted, this was 5 years ago, so that kind of stuff still happened occasionally. And I think she thought I went in and like did drugs or something. I walked out just bouncing and so happy and giddy that I had walked in and found those 2 bottles. So those were the good old days. That probably doesn't happen on many store shelves anymore, but it makes the hunt even more fun. So, all right, now I'm going to jump into the Eagle Rare 17. Obviously, it's 17 years old. Moved to 101 proof. That's more of a traditional proof of kind of Eagle Rare from back in the day. Let's see, it was, I think, New Orleans, then moved to Lawrenceburg, then moved to Frankfurt, which it is now with the Buffalo Trace Distilling. Yeah, so there's a lot going on with this. There's brown sugar. There's it has a little bit of the dry notes, almost more of like an almond note than anything else. It's a little bit of sweet, but not not overly dry, but slightly tannic. Okay. Man, so that's really good. It's like, man, it's like, and this is where it gets tough on doing these reviews live. I'm just opening the bottles and going, but it's like a brulee banana almost, and like toasted walnuts and just a lot of different stuff going on. This is really good. I think this. I shouldn't say it after 2 sips, but it's definitely, I would choose this over the 2014 version. Yeah, it's like a bright cherry note, but then it moves into some more sweetness. Obviously, there's a little bit of vanilla in there, but wow, that's actually really good. And I'm been down on the Eagle Rare the last couple of years. Yeah, there's still it's pretty complex. There's a lot to it, and I'll give them credit. I think bumping up the proof a little bit, I don't want to say it hides it, but it just balances out some of those tannic notes a little bit. So yes, you are tasting the age. You're still getting a little bit of the leather, but not nearly as much. It's not nearly as prominent as it was in the 2014. There is a little more of like that vanilla ice cream and toasted nuts, all that kind of stuff, and almost a little bit of like if you what's the roasted almonds that they have at the fair and everything that you smell. It's not the smell of that, but it's the taste where you bite into it, and it's a little more balanced than just the pure sugar smell that you get, and that's a little bit of what I get on the palate here. And then just with the glass being dried out, there's huge notes of orange peel. That's really good. So we'll mark that one down into the wing category for this year. So far, or we'll put it on the left side. Sazerac, I think it's still over on the right side, probably taking the L this year. But all right, so that this video isn't 2 hours long, I'm going to move right on, and I'm not drunk by the end of it. I'm going to move on to the Thomas Handy. So if you're not familiar with Thomas Handy, it is the 6.5-ish year old Sazerac rye. So if you see Baby Saz on the shelf, it's the same whiskey. It just is the barrel proof version of it. And now that we have it's funny, I just saw the live viewer count drop by like 30 people when I said the Thomas Handy. Nobody cares about Thomas Handy apparently. Now Sazerac 18 year is the exact same whiskey, just at 6.5 years old and barrel proof. So usually we have barrel counts on this, but Buffalo Trace decided not to release the barrel numbers this year, therefore breaking bourbon's barrel calculation formula unattainable. So I get it. I'm sure with last year with the stag counts being so high, they probably got who knows how many thousands of calls of retailers saying, "What do you mean I only got 2 bottles? I saw that there were 36,000 bottles produced or something." So I get it. They probably didn't want that information out there, but it is still fun to see, like, okay, how many bottles of this are there? How many bottles of that? All right. So I have the 2019 version, and then I believe I have the 2015 version. Let me just double check that really quick. It is the 126.9, so that is the 2015. Yeah, so I have the 2015 version. So the 2019 Thomas Handy is 125.7 proof, and it is 6 years and 2 months old. All right. Pour a little bit of that one, and then we will get the comparison going for, so pretty close in proof, about one proof point off. Color's very similar. Color is very similar. So, and the idea, if you're doing tastings to move from lower proof to higher proof, that's pretty typical. You don't want to, burn your taste buds and your palate out really quick and early on. So, try to do that if possible, or at least have some relatively close scale. So, I don't like to jump from 101 proof with the Eagle Rare 17 to the 126. But it's a once a year tasting that I do, so we'll let it slide this time. Actually, that's the 2019. So I'm going to start with the 2015, just to kind of set a base and get an idea of what I'm looking for. Yeah, there's always it's black pepper, it's bacon spice, it's cloves. I get like a honeydew note, a little bit of big league chewing gum, all that kind of stuff. But there's just it packs a punch. Going from the lower proof whiskeys, jumping up to that, like you just feel the heat. All right. Let's jump into the 2019 version of the Thomas Handy. Mm. So the initial, it's like, what's the hot tamale candy, and man, there's just really good sweet and spice balance. Yeah, almost on the nose, and it sounded, or kind of sounded weird in my head, so I didn't want to say it initially, but I keep getting it. It's like the Flintstones chewable vitamins, kind of that sweet, medicinal, fruity flavor. The nose is really interesting, actually. There's some different notes in there. Yeah, it's like almost like a high, like think of like a fruity hard candy. I'm trying to think of not trying to think of what that would be, but like the powdery sugar candy, like a Fun Dip almost. Yeah. So the nose is, here's where I'll critique it a little bit, because the nose gives you something where it's like that Fun Dip fruitiness, the dried candy, kind of not lighter, but definitely not as high fruit. And then you take a sip, and it's like hot tamale candy, heat. Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to say something is hot at 125 point, whatever, 125.7 proof. Like, who doesn't expect that to be hot? Like, it's always going to be high proof and a little on the hot side. But is there too much heat? I think the finish falls off a little bit, but all in all, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's a pretty good release. So I don't want to rank it in the Thomas Handy equation of where it may fall through the years, but a couple years ago, I was able to make old fashions with Thomas Handy. So those days have changed. I can't quite. Yeah, Smarties. So Jeff said in the comments, Smarties. That's a really good note of kind of what the nose is. So yeah, and just to kind of wrap this up, we're coming close to 30 minutes. So with these three, the Sazerac, I don't know. It was just funky to me. There's some weird stuff going on in there. It had some good notes. Don't get me wrong. It was pretty good. It was enjoyable. It wasn't like I wanted to spit it out, but there was just that weird funkiness through the palate. The Eagle Rare 17, the 101 proof, that was delicious. I thought that was really good. I had high hopes for it last year, and I don't remember enjoying it all that much last year. I thought that was so far the front runner for me. And then the Thomas Handy felt like a pretty good year. It wasn't stellar in my opinion. It's a great barrel proof rye. Some interesting notes, good balance, heat on the finish. But overall, it wasn't like something that I was just blown away by. So I'll leave it at that as my ranking. So Eagle Rare, Thomas Handy, Sazerac 18 for now. So thank you all for joining tonight. I'm going to wrap it up there, and I'll be back tomorrow night with the George T. Stagg and the William LaRue Weller reviews tomorrow. So if three barrels or three bottles have me already kind of tripping over my words, that's why I didn't want to do 3 barrel proof whiskeys together tomorrow. So I'll be back with those two at 9 o'clock tomorrow in the Bourbonr Facebook group. So thank you all for joining.